So the newly launched iPad 10th Gen is this weird little iPad that has messed up the entire iPad portfolio with its existence. While it has been substantially upgraded from the 9th Gen iPad, it is worth noting that the iPad Air 5th Gen, which also launched this year, is only a few thousands more, which is exactly what I'm going to explore in this review of the iPad 10th generation and compare it against the iPad Air 5 for some more context. If you don't know me yet, I'm Ershad, you're watching Track and Tech English.
Let's begin this battle.
At the outset, the iPad 10th generation and the iPad Air 5 look very similar, but the iPad 10th generation is actually thicker and heavier than the iPad Air 5. Secondly, the position of the smart connector has also moved now. Instead of it being on the back panel, it's now on the bottom side when you actually hold it in landscape orientation. While both these iPads have the Touch ID fingerprint sensor on the shorter top edge, it is the iPad Air that has the magnetic connector for the Apple Pencil 2. You don't get a magnetic connector on the iPad 10. Anyway, I'll talk more about the accessories in a bit. However, there's one iPad 10 design change that is actually very useful and very functional. So finally, Apple has moved the position of the front-facing camera, which is on the portrait edge, is now on the landscape edge. So when you're actually doing a video call on both these iPads, you will notice that because of the position of the front-facing camera, you're oriented in a very weird side angle and not bang in the center of the frame like you are on the iPad 10. By the way, you get a 12MP camera on the rear, which also includes face detection autofocus, and you get a 12MP ultra wide angle camera on the front, which I've already spoken about. Now, I'm not somebody who likes taking pictures with iPads, but if you're someone who does that, there's going to be no difference between the pictures that are captured by these iPads, as you can tell from the image samples on your screen right now. But I come back to the camera orientation once again. Just for that reason alone, I think that a lot of people will end up picking the iPad 10 over the iPad Air 5. By the way, this generation of your basic iPad has a Type-C port. Evidently, Apple is moving everything towards Type-C now, including the Apple TV remote, which has Type-C. But don't get too excited about the Type-C port on the iPad 10th Gen. I'll discuss about that more in a bit. As for the rest of the design, these are easily the best designed tablets in the market and the most premium feeling ones too. And if anybody buys a tablet today, it has to be an iPad. That's how good they are. Now, talking about accessories, with this new iPad, Apple has introduced a new Magic Folio keyboard, which is available for about Rs 25,000. The naming convention has completely gone bonkers. I cannot remember them. Anyway, with the iPad Air, you get the Magic Keyboard, which is not the one that is connected to this. This is just the folio case that I'm using with the iPad Air. Now, that Magic Keyboard is available for 5,000 rupees more. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. This setup is cheaper compared to the one that includes the Magic Keyboard. Now, on the iPad Air and the iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard, you do get a bit of elevation, and the keyboard itself, in fact, that whole system itself has an extra Type-C port for charging, which is definitely very useful. Having said that, I still do like this Magic Folio keyboard better, and there are 3 reasons for it. Now, before I talk about those 3 reasons, I'm pretty certain that there's at least one reason why you like our channel. So hit that subscribe button and maybe even comment below for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. The major reason is because you get a proper function row on the keyboard itself, which is not available on the Magic Keyboard. Now, using this function row, you can of course search the entire system. You have controls for playback, you have controls for brightness, volume, all of those, and much more. Secondly, the touchpad is also wider slightly, so you get more space for your finger to move around, which is definitely helpful. Also, what you will notice is that the keyboard and the folio are 2 separate pieces attached to the iPad 10. Which means that if you don't want to use the keyboard or if you don't want to use the folio, you can do that and in process also reduce the weight of the entire setup. My only problem with this folio and keyboard setup is that it's available only in a white color, which means that it's gonna get dirty really soon. I'm terrible at maintaining white products and white clothes as well. So Apple, if you're watching this, we really need a black variant soon. However, all of that goodwill that you get with the folio and the keyboard is completely undone by the fact that you only get support for Apple Pencil 1, which was launched way back in 2015, and therefore it really surprises me that Apple is managing to sell that even today in 2022. The other problem is, now that this iPad has gone Type-C, the Pencil 1 actually has a lightning connector, which means that you need to get yet another dongle to charge it. And that dongle will set you back by 900 rupees. It's not like Apple will provide that in the box. So yeah, huge letdown. So even if you're remotely inclined towards taking notes or drawing, then easily I would recommend picking up the iPad Air because it has Apple Pencil 2 support. And Apple Pencil 2 is a huge upgrade. Not only do you get a magnetic attachment, the latency is also much improved. Another spec sheet that looks deceptively similar on both these iPads is that of the displays. You get a 10.9-inch IPS LCD liquid retina panel with 500 nits of peak brightness on both of these. Having said that, the iPad 10 Gen doesn't have a laminated panel, whereas the iPad Air does. In daily usage, you'll be like, hey, that's not really too much of an issue. Laminated, non-laminated, I don't really care about it. I don't care if the touch substrate is connected to the display or not. But if I tell you that your contrast goes for a complete toss, and that is why Apple hasn't enabled HDR on the iPad 10 Gen as well, wouldn't that make you want to actually pick up the iPad Air instead? Yup, you do not get HDR playback on YouTube or Netflix, and when you're watching any HDR videos side by side, the difference is night and day. You know what? Take a look at it for yourself and let me know what you think. Trust me, this is a huge deal breaker for me. Now, to add to the woes of the whole multimedia experience, you do get stereo speaker setup on the iPad 10 generation, but they're not nearly as good as the kind of quality of sound that you can listen to on the iPad Air 5. Enough talking, you guys take a listen for yourself and let me know what you think. Alright, now moving on to performance, it goes without saying that the iPad Air has M1. So M1's of course going to be much more powerful than the A14 Bionic inside the base iPad. In Geekbench, you notice that the single core score is in touching distance of each other, but the multi-core score is much higher on the iPad Air with M1. I also ran a 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme stress test. Noticed that the best loop score is much higher on the iPad Air. Stability scores are very similar, and the battery drop was slightly higher on the iPad Air compared to the iPad 10. Also, another thing that I noticed while running the test itself is that the graphic quality, the graphical fidelity of the iPad Air was much better than that of the iPad 10. So basically, if you want an iPad for gaming, then the iPad Air is the way to go. Also, the transfer speeds using the USB Type-C port with USB 2.0 speeds is, oh my god, it's terrible. So I transferred a 5GB file on both these iPads, and the iPad Air is 20 times faster, at least 20 times faster than the iPad 10th generation when it comes to transfer speeds. So I don't have to really say much about performance out here. It's just an easy victory for the iPad Air. Now coming to the software experience, you get iPad OS on both. I updated both of these to the iPad OS 16.1.1, which is the latest software update that's available, which is not in beta. Now, while iPad OS has a lot of features that are not even remotely available on other tablet operating systems, Android. That said, the iPad OS experience doesn't feel as refined as, iOS or even macOS. For example, the Stage Manager, which is available only on iPads with M1 and M2 chips, which means that it is available only on the iPad Air and not iPad 10th, that Stage Manager feature is not very well implemented. I was finding it really confusing to use and, incorporate into my workflow as well. My criticisms notwithstanding, iPad OS is still by far the best tablet OS in the market right now, and the kind of apps, the kind of refined tablet apps that you can get on the App Store is unparalleled at the moment. And of course, DaVinci Resolve is also coming to iPad really soon, so I'm excited for that. But no word on FCP yet. I hope it happens soon. Apple, you guys gotta do it. Alright, coming to battery life, Apple is very weird when it comes to talking about the capacity of the batteries used inside iPads. So you don't get mAh numbers, but you get watt-hour numbers. You get a 28 watt-hour battery inside both of these, and Apple says that you can expect about 10 hours of continuous browsing on both of these. But like I saw in the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme stress test, since the M1 pushes for performance, it is possibly going to lose more battery. So depending on your work scenario, if you're going to be using it for basic tasks, then battery life will be very similar to what you get on the iPad 10th generation. But otherwise, if you're going to be pushing it for performance, if you're going to be using it for video editing, Procreate, all of those things, then the iPad Air will lose more battery life faster. But you know what, I'll take that extra firepower when I need it for slightly less battery life. So for concluding this, it's just clear in my head For about rupees 8,000 more, you get a better display, you get a better processor, you get better software experience, you get a better Apple Pencil support, you just get better everything on the iPad Air compared to the iPad 10. Okay, maybe not everything on the iPad 10. You do get a camera, front-facing camera, which is oriented better. But is that alone a system seller? But there's also that Magic Folio keyboard that a lot of people could be attracted to. Maybe you can get this entire setup for cheaper. But then again, I just feel that a little more and you get a much better setup with the iPad Air. But there might be some folks in the audience who must be thinking, hey Ashar, what about that yellow iPad 10 Gen? You don't get that anywhere else. Well, in that case, I can't really help you because your vanity metric will end up making you choose the wrong product. That's the truth of the matter. You know what? I know what the real purpose of the iPad 10 is. It is to get people to buy the more expensive iPad Air. Win-win for Apple. Alright, so that was our detailed review of the iPad 10 generation in comparison against the iPad Air 5. What did you guys think of it? Will you still end up buying the iPad 10 Gen? I think that a lot of people will still be interested, but I'd suggest picking up the iPad Air instead. Alright, so see you guys in the next one. Until next time, keep tracking and stay safe.